Hello and welcome to Clay to Canopy, the show where I attempt to make just about everything from the ground up. In today's episode, I am going to be doing some textile dyeing. I really needed a break. It's been quite the couple of months between teaching and trying to do these tutorials. For me, textile dyeing is a complete break and a way to just kind of let go and not have so much structure and basically just have some fun. These are some samples that I previously dyed. The primary method I have used in these samples is called Itajime. It is a Japanese method of folding your fabric and clamping up little shapes onto the fabric before they get thrown into the dye bath. It's one of the processes I absolutely adore, especially since I'm a woodworker. I can make my own shapes. You can probably kind of tell what shape I use. I have a lot of rectangles, triangles, there's like a star-shaped piece of wood, some circles, probably a pumpkin cutout, I'm guessing. Here's another one that I have. I had a couple of wooden leaves. Now you want to use wood or plastic because it will not react with the dyes. Today I'm going to be playing with some of these little, this is just plywood squares, and I have some triangles, and these used to be curtain rod hooks. I sliced them in half. So aside from your actual shapes, you also need to have some sticks that hold the shapes in place on the fabric and something to tie it with. You can also purchase pre-cut shapes. These were cut on a laser cutter. You can get them in a craft store or online. But keep in mind that usually these shapes that you find there are going to be a little bit on the thinner side. Having something a little bit thicker will be easier for you to get pressure. Before you do all that, you also need your materials for the dyeing. And I use a company called Pro Chemical Dye. I am not working with them. I've just been using them for years and I love the dyes. They're really stable. They're commercial dye. Some of these pieces I've had for 15 to 18 years and this color is still vibrant. It's worth the investment if you get into doing this and you really enjoy it. They are great because I can also use them to dye and color wood. Basically anything that is a natural fiber you can use on these dyes and they work really great with. Here I have my Bible. The company that sells these dyes is very thorough with what they give you as far as information goes, and you have tons and tons of different samples and processes. And then of course in the very back, everyone should have, every chemical has a materials and safety data sheet that I have then printed out and keep in the back here. If I'm having any weird allergic reactions or anything like that, I have the safety data already printed out in the back. It's just handy to have as a reference. So today I will be doing dyeing using the Pro MX reactive dyes, and I brought out only two colors because I will be making a red, a blue, and then I will be combining the two to make a purple dye. And that's one of the great things about these pigments. You can mix and match a whole bunch of them, so you don't have to buy a ton of color. You can just get your primary colors, your red, your blue, your yellow, and as long as you have primaries, you can basically make just about any color. In addition to that, you will also need some Synthropol. It's just a mild laundry detergent washing agent that I have already pre-treated the fabric that I'm going to be working with today. You need some Pro Creme dye activator or soda ash. Honestly, I think they're the same thing, but the website says dye activator or soda ash. I don't know, never question it. It's cheap either way. I use the soda ash when I am pre-washing the fabric, and then I use the dye activator for in the dye. I have Metaphos. I think it's Metaphos. Metaphos. No? That's how you say it. It's basically a water softener, so if you have really hard water, you should throw in some of this. In addition to that, you will also need some common table salts. I get it from the 99. I set up a tarp with some buckets over there. When you are doing this, you want to make sure that you lay out everything, have it nice and covered. And I am wearing my okay to get ruined clothes today. Measuring spoons and cups, and something to pre-mix your colored dyes in. Alright, let's get prepping up our fabric and then we'll move on to making the dye. First thing you need to do is really iron your fabric, and this is just cotton muslin that I threw in the washing machine with a couple drops of Synthropol, a quarter of a cup of soda ash, and I threw in 2 yards of this muslin and threw it in on hot in the washing machine, and then I didn't even dry it. I just kind of let it sat here. Alright, so now is where the fun begins. I'm going to take one of my pieces. I just cut up these pieces to be a little bit more manageable, and also so I can get more samples done. So you could leave this whole and be working with a large piece if you wanted to, depending on what you're using it for. But for me today is just all about play. This is a good size if you're gonna do like turn it into a little pillow or something, I don't know. Okay, so I'm gonna take one of my pieces and you're just going to play with the way you fold it. And there are no rules here. You could fold it all different ways. And I've kept my iron on and close by because I'm going to use it to help press, and I think now's a good point for me to press. The more folds you have, the more pressure you're going to need on the clamps in order to retain those designs, because as you get closer into the meat of the fabric, you may get a little bit of muddling happening. That's something you're going to have to play with. I'm hoping that I haven't folded too much. So when you wrap your pieces, you want to have the same shape on the top and the bottom in order to replicate that pattern. So for me, I'm going to be sandwiching this little donut here and then sandwiching my little triangle here. And you're going to need 2 sticks, one for the top and one for the bottom. And basically the sticks are what hold your pieces in place, and try and do your best at keeping them even over each other. And this is where the string comes in handy, because now I will be using the string to tie up my ends and keep this nice and tight. Just going to come to my edge here. You don't want to tie this down too tight on this end. You'll start off with it just a little bit tight. I want to try and avoid getting my string caught on the fabric. I don't want that to create a resist. The point is to have only those shapes create a resist. I'm just kind of using the string to tie at each end. Tie a knot and you should be good to go. I want to make sure that you got some pressure there with your pieces, and if you haven't, then do your adjustments. I'm going to set that aside and continue on doing different folds and just playing around with my shapes here, and then these bundles will be ready to go into the die. I just randomly selected a bucket to throw one of my bundles into, and I have 2 in each one, and I only have enough water that it takes to cover the fabric. And unfortunately, because I'm using this one with very large sticks, I did need a lot more water in this one, and it's just warm tap water is fine. So the first step is I'm going to be throwing in some table salt into each one of these. I'm just gonna add 2 tablespoons of salt into the smaller water bucket ones. And I'll go with 4 in this bigger one. I'll let this sit for about 15 minutes or so. So for these 2 smaller ones, I'm gonna put a tablespoon of color in each. And then for the middle, because I have so much liquid in here, I'm gonna put a tablespoon of each one, and this will be my purple batch. Alright, so I just grabbed some warm water to dissolve this. Oh, now it's all over me. To help dissolve the Metaphos. Now I'm adding a teaspoon of that. Again, this is optional, it's only for hard water. Throw that into this. And my next round of 2 tablespoons of salt. I'm going to repeat that for the other 2 buckets. The middle one, I'm giving that extra bit of salt because it's got more liquid. Alright, these are going to sit for another half an hour, and then I'm going to come back and do another round of salt. Okay, I'm going to add 3 tablespoons of dye activator to the small ones and 4 to the big one. This is going to sit in here for an hour, and I'm going to come back every few minutes and agitate the water so that I don't get splotchiness. After the dye set for 1 hour, I went and I saved a gallon of each of the dye bath to use for a later project, and then after that I discarded the rest, thoroughly rinsed each of the bundles with just some warm water from the tap. You could soak them in a bucket for a little bit and kind of zhuzh them around in the bucket to get rid of any of the excess dye. You want to rinse that through as much as you possibly can prior to undoing the bundle, because if you undo the bundle too soon, you may end up getting some bleed through where the resist was. So as soon as you are satisfied that you've removed most of the excess dye, you can cut through the bundle and then go ahead and rinse your piece. And you want to keep rinsing until the water runs clear. I just added a drop of dish soap, rubbed it together with my hands, and then continued to wash it through till all the soap and any of the dye discharge had left the piece. I then hung it outside to dry in a sunny location so that the sun could add an extra layer of setting. Now this doesn't mean that the fabric is not washable and that it needs to be, have special treatment. I found that once it's first been dyed, letting the sun dry it and set the last bit of that dye is really helpful in prolonging the life of the dye. But then after that, whatever you turn it into, it can be thrown in the regular wash with everything else. Alright you guys, here are my completed samples. Some worked, some did not, and it all depends on how I folded that fabric. And you can see here that this one was maybe too tightly bound, where I have some areas where the resist didn't really work. This one was nice and crisp, but this one I had a little bit more of a loose fold. It's all a big experiment really when you're doing this kind of thing. If you're not really happy with any of the pieces, you could always just refold it up and throw it into another dye bath, something darker or even something a little bit lighter, and it will alter and layer over colors, and I've done that many times. You can get some really great results. I would not recommend doing them with something that you are really happy with. Wherever you place that resist will keep the original color. So if I was to fold this up and place the new resist that ended up landing in between here, I'd retain this blue, and let's say I went over it with a yellow, the rest would turn like a green, and then the spots that do not have the resist would be a yellow. That being said, you don't even have to do the folding method. You can completely do a different method altogether and layer over different techniques. Anyway, this is the end of my playing with commercial dyes in the Itajime method. I hope to be able to do some other fabric methods soon. Thanks for joining me. Please like, share, and subscribe if you have not done so already. You're torturing the lizard. My goodness. I'm gonna have to come and get it from you.